Beneath the seas that now divide us, there was once a single land. Vast, green, alive. Here, the first footsteps carved a path through ancient forests and rivers, adapting, surviving, dreaming. There was Malaysia's lost world, and the story it still holds. In Southeast Asia lies a nation shaped by two lands, Peninsular Malaysia and Borneo. To the west, Peninsular Malaysia, a land bridge once connected to the great Asian continent. To the east, the northern edge of Borneo, the third largest island in the world, blanketed by one of Earth's oldest rainforests. A land of two names, two coasts, but one ancient story.
If we go to West Malaysia, of course, the sites in the Lenggong Valley, again, are World Heritage Sites, and it's an incredible region that is very rich in archaeology.
And there, hidden for millennia, one of the most significant artifacts ever discovered came to light.
The most important of all is the Perak Man. When I discovered him, it was in a cave that you wouldn't expect to find anything because you couldn't see the floor. The floor was covered with huge boulders. In fact, if one looked at it for the first time like I did, I said, oh no, this is going to be tough. I'm not sure I want to excavate here, but something in me said, no, remove those huge boulders. And when I did, that was how we discovered him. When we excavated the trench containing the Perak Man, we didn't know it was a skeleton because we saw just his knees first, and we were not sure what it was. So we brushed the earth off very, very carefully, and we were still unsure because it was a very short skeleton. And then we found that, oh, it's short because it was buried in a fetal position. So that's why it was not long. There was an excitement that it was a skeleton because the skeleton can tell you a lot of story from almost every part of his body. You can know his diet, you can know his age, you can know his gender, you can know, his profession even if there's evidence in his burial. So the excitement was actually slow excitement, bit by bit, as we unraveled facts about him. And that was a slow process. So the excitement actually was over a period of about a year or more because we had to send things back for tests. We had to send things for all sorts of analysis. So it's when the analysis comes back and then we put everything together and say, wow, he is the most complete of his time period. He's the earliest skeleton that was found so complete. And not only that, but he contributed towards other disciplines as well. He contributed to medical sciences because he was born with a congenital deformity called brachymesophalangeal type A2, which has not been found in archaeological specimens. So this gives a time depth for medical science. And he also gave us information on burial ritual for the Paleolithic period, which we did not know of before this. So he was a very complete kind of burial to tell us about life during his time.
But who exactly was the Perak Man?
The Perak Man lived around 10 to 11,000 years ago. He died at the age of 40 to 45 years old at a time when the lifespan was only about 20 to 25. That means he survived several generations, and he would have been a very important source of information for the young ones. He could tell them where to hunt, how to hunt, what to hunt, when to hunt, and if you're sick, what do you do, which herbs do you use. So he was like an encyclopedia of knowledge, you know, that they could refer to him for things. So he must have been a very highly respected man, well taken care of, for him to survive to such a ripe old age. Given his handicap, he probably could not go hunting. So that also probably added years to his life, more years to his life. And then he was buried in a very respectful manner. He was placed with about 9 types of animals that had been hunted and prepared for him to eat along his journey to the next world. There was a belief. After putting him in that position and arranging his stone tools and food, he grasped food in his hands. In his right hand there was food, you know, there were animal bones in his hand. He was covered with about almost 3,000 shells. That too had been chopped. The siput sedut, its tip had been chopped so that it's easy for him to suck. Then he was sprinkled, his body was sprinkled with red hematite. The red hematite is a kind of iron oxide. They grind it into powder, so it becomes like red powder, and that's sprinkled over him. From the kinds of animals that were buried with him, we also can tell their skills in hunting, because if it's a fast-moving animal, it would take them longer to hunt. And among the animals was a harimau bintang, which is, you need some skill to hunt a tiger. Kera, beruk, siamang, rusa, these were all buried with him. But what's interesting about the Perak Man is that you could tell the cause of death for the Perak Man. But what's interesting about the Perak Man is that you could tell the cause of death for the Perak Man. Now, this is very unusual. In his case, we examined him and found that he died because of his teeth. He had bad gum problems, and it was all full of nana, and he was in great pain for about a week. High probability that that was his cause of death. Now, being in pain for about a week also meant that you're giving your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren time to hunt for all these animals. So given that there was such a large variety of animals, we suspect it tallies, right?
The Niah Caves must stand out as one of the most important discoveries, one of the most important places in Malaysian archaeology.
The Niah Caves are critical for informing us about, out of Africa to the dispersal of our own species, Homo sapiens, because it's got a record going back 50,000 years, and early in that sequence we have the definite Homo sapiens fossil.
because the very earliest deposits that were excavated by Tom Harrison and Barbara Harrison for a long time provided the earliest evidence that we have in Southeast Asia for the arrival of our kind, for modern humans, from Africa. And the site really stood for about 50 years in terms of its place globally as documenting the spread of Homo sapiens into Southeast Asia. One of the other amazing things about the Niah Caves, of course, is that it's a place that has a very long and extensive archaeological record. So it covers those very early hunter-gatherers right through to the arrival of farming and Neolithic farming in the region, and then the later Middle Age as well. So, and then on top of that, there's the sort of the proto-historic and historic story as well. So Niah Caves is unusual because it has a very long and relatively complete archaeological record that spans pretty much the entire story of our species in Southeast Asia.
Another important archaeological site in Malaysia is Bukit Tungkorak.
Bukit Tungkorak is located in Semporna, Sabah. Bukit Tungkorak is a Neolithic site dated about 3,000 years ago, and it is one of the very significant and important Neolithic site in Southeast Asia. Why? Because it is one of the largest pottery sites I've seen in Southeast Asia, with millions of potsherds. The findings at the Bukit Tungkorak is very significant and important in the understanding of early human migration. We have theories of human migration from South China to Taiwan, through the Philippines, into Borneo, into the Indonesian archipelagos, to Micronesia, Melanesia, and the Pacific. Bukit Tungkorak has revealed a maritime culture, where that site is located near the coast, and we found a lot of food remains that is connected to a maritime-oriented society. And we also found obsidian, which is a volcanic rock used for composite knives. This obsidian is actually traced chemically to Malaysia in New Britain, in Papua New Guinea. And the evidence at Tungkorak shows that there is actually a long-distance trade, maritime trade, between New Britain in Melanesia to Sabah, in Borneo. So it shows that human migration are bi-directional also. It doesn't go one way, so there are trade coming in also from Melanesia into Sabah about 3,000 years ago over a long distance.
There are many sites around that period in Semenanjung, Malaysia. One big site is Gua Chak. And Gua Chak produced two-layer sequence, suggesting that there were two cultures at that time. The major period is pre-Neolithic, and then the Neolithic period.
The tools they left behind, the stone blades, the fire pits, the bones buried in silence, tell us where they lived, how they survived, and how Malaysia became more than a stop along the way. It was a home. But to understand how and why they stayed, we must first understand the land they walked on.
So today Borneo is of course an island, and it's one of the largest islands in the world. But if we go back just 20,000 years ago, it seems like a long time, and of course it is, but it's not very far back if we think about the human story. It was the last time that we had what we call an ice age, where the global temperatures were much lower than they are today, and there were a significant amount of seawater that were locked up in the north and south poles in the polar caps.
And so the Arctic and the Antarctic ice caps grew and grew and grew, taking water out of the oceans. And therefore, in the cold periods, sea levels dropped significantly below where they are today. And if you drop sea level by that amount, you end up creating an enormous landmass linking up the islands that are now island Southeast Asia, creating therefore what's been given the name Sundaland.
Sundaland was a world without borders, a single sprawling land where rivers flowed freely and life moved without restraint.
If we go back to that time, then Borneo was a part of mainland Southeast Asia, and in fact, as were the islands of Java and Sumatra as well. You could have walked from Borneo via West Malaysia up into Thailand to China, or you could have gone west to Africa. So there are large areas of land that were unlocked.
So it's a geography that is utterly different from today, and an area at least the size of Western Europe was exposed, where now there's the oceans around island Southeast Asia.
And then very quickly, when the climate began to change, the seas rose very fast, maybe sometimes noticeable changes within the lifetime of individuals, decades, hundreds of years, and areas that were previously land would have been flooded by the sea. So quite rapid change. And this would have forced people to change the way they live very, very quickly.
People move slightly, of course, if the sea level is rising. If you're a hunter-gatherer, you have to move to somewhere inland and continue hunting. But don't forget, when those sea levels rose, what was formerly a very large and somewhat dry continental extension called Sundaland became lots of small islands. The hunter-gatherer people of that time, in fact, increased in numbers and started to build very large shell mills because of the productivity of the rising sea.
As rising waters created new shorelines and enriched river systems, the land grew more fertile, teeming with life. Population began to grow. Yet the rainforest was no paradise. Dense, humid, and full of unseen dangers. It posed a relentless challenge to survival.
People have lived in the tropics for a long, long time, and in fact, our own species, Homo sapiens, evolved in Africa, in the tropical and subtropical area. So as a species, we're very comfortable in the hot climates. I mean, physiologically, we're adapted to living in these hot, humid climates. People pass through Southeast Asia and down into island Southeast Asia, they found themselves again in the tropical zone. So physiologically, people were very well adapted to living in Southeast Asia. But the rainforest is a completely different story.
Yeah, rainforest is very challenging to live in. Thinking of it as for hunter-gatherers, in one sense, because you don't have herds of animals. You can sometimes get large gatherings of pigs, but mostly you haven't got the kind of herds of animals that hunter-gatherers were able to exploit in the colder parts across Eurasia.
The animals in Southeast Asia would have been more difficult to hunt than in places like America and Australia that were reached by Homo sapiens as the first human arrivals.
So when we think about our ancestry in Africa, that was people living on the savannah, much more open, hot, humid, tropical landscapes, but not very forested, not densely forested. But when people got to Southeast Asia, of course, they encountered these rainforests, extensive rainforest areas. And the evidence from the studies of ancient plant remains suggests that Sundaland was covered by rainforest. On the ground, there are some plants to be collected, maybe pigs, but a lot of the really high quality food that's highly valued, the fruits, some of the arboreal mammals and things are really quite difficult to get.
So, yeah, I mean, adaptation, of course, is something that I think all people do. They have to, otherwise they are not going to survive. To me, ancient humans were all intelligent, just as we are today. They didn't have the technology and knowledge that we have, but they, their brain sizes and capacities for thinking were the same as ours. So I'm sure that they, whenever they entered a new environment, they would very quickly work out how to make a good living.
I think at different times it would have been different. It's hotter now because of climate change, probably. But at that time it was comfortable because they didn't burn forests. They had cool forests, they had source of food, they had source of making their stone tools. They had water supply, clean water. I think it was a very comfortable place for them. Lots of tropical fruits, different seasons that would provide a continuous supply of food.
We should say the rainforest wasn't entirely the same at different periods. So, for example, at the coldest periods, 20, 30,000 years ago, there are animals that were being hunted around Niah, which is a coastal site, which you only find today now on Mount Kinabalu. So cold, dry conditions have brought animals that are way up there now right down to the coast. We are dealing with a rainforest that's not simply static, but it's also clear that people learnt how to live in rainforest in these early parts of dispersals.
And what they liked over here especially were the shellfish, shells, siput sedut, Brochure costula and Brochure spinosa, a lot of it from the rivers. They're delicious. I enjoy them too.
Why are they just modern humans now and these other homonyms have disappeared? We all think of the phrases used are adaptability, plasticity, because Homo sapiens was able to live successfully in rainforest, as beautifully demonstrated at Niah.
Examination of the Perak Man in the Perak area, as well as Guacha, we find that these skeletons were Australo-Melanesioids, and they were present not just in Semenanjung, Malaysia, but they were also present in Gua. The Niah skull is also an Australo-Melanesioid. So this landmass was an area where these people survived or lived until they moved on.
Across the shifting rivers and shadowed forests of ancient Malaysia, early humans learned to survive and thrive. They built no monuments, yet left behind the greatest legacy of all: endurance. Deep in the heart of Borneo, carved into limestone and silence, lies a place where the past still breathes. A cave not just of shelter, but of memory. It holds the oldest human secrets in this land.